Hello everyone, welcome to History and Culture. In the east of the world, Chinese civilization has shone brightly for over 5,000 years. Its origins stretching far and wide. However, like all things, it has its dual nature, and Chinese traditional culture is no exception. It is not only a treasure of dazzling wisdom and beauty but also contains many feudal remnants that many people despise. For instance, the concept of male superiority and female inferiority was one of the many societal vices of the past. And this ideology deeply influenced people's beliefs and behaviors for a long time. Today, we often see such scenes in many Chinese historical dramas. If a woman commits a serious crime, she is usually sentenced to death by beheading. However, these depictions are often handled vaguely, with most of the time showing the criminal kneeling in prison garb on the execution ground, where the executioner swiftly decapitates her. In reality, however, before ancient women were beheaded, regardless of their former status or dignity, they would be stripped of their upper garments during the execution. Historical records even describe the famous Tang dynasty scholar and poet, Shang Wanwaner, being executed in this manner. So, why was this done? The practice had deep cultural roots and was influenced by the special regulations of the society at the time. There were two main reasons for stripping the women. On one hand, it was a form of humiliation, and on the other hand, there was a cruel ritual behind it. In ancient times, female criminals condemned to death had to undergo a harsh ritual before being taken to the execution ground. They were stripped of their upper garments, exposing their bare skin to the public. This practice was not just a physical torment but also a mental destruction. In fact, many women throughout history, upon learning they would be sentenced to death, chose to take their own lives in advance to avoid such humiliation. For example, Zhao Heda of the Han dynasty, fearing disgrace, chose to hang herself when Wang Mang, the nephew of the Empress Dowager, sent people to capture her. Similarly, Princess Taiping of the Tang dynasty, after failing in a power struggle, chose to end her life at home when she realized her fate. Mentioning these regulations also brings up the evolution of the status of women in ancient China. As is well known, women in ancient China generally had a low status. But there were certain dynasties in which their position was relatively higher. During the ancient Shang dynasty, the society was transitioning from a matrilineal to a patrilineal system. But women did not entirely lose their status or influence. From oracle bone inscriptions, we can see that many women played an important role in the political and military affairs of the Shang dynasty. The most famous example is Fu Hao, the wife of King Wu Ding, who not only participated in the king's sacrificial rituals and divination but also accompanied him on military campaigns, commanding the troops and suppressing rebellions. Her contributions were crucial to the stability and strength of the Shang dynasty. In the Zhou dynasty, society underwent a shift from gathering to agriculture, which made male labor more important in production and gradually led to the replacement of the matrilineal system by a patrilineal one. However, the influence of the matrilineal society did not entirely disappear, it was preserved in some aspects. For example, some of the earliest surnames, such as Ji, Yao, Si, Gui, and Yun, all had the female character as a part of their structure, suggesting that these surnames may have originated from the mother's lineage or tribe. In the pre-Qin period, there was little prejudice or discrimination against women who remarried, and men did not refuse to marry them. This was because the marriage system in the pre-Qin era had not yet formed strict rules or moral codes, and women's identities and positions were not completely bound by the patrilineal system. During the Warring States period, the patriarchal system gradually took hold, and women's freedoms and rights were deprived and suppressed. The marriages of noble women were often arranged by their fathers or brothers, and they had to sacrifice for the family's interests or political alliances. Moreover, the system of concubinage turned many women into mere appendages of men. traded or exchanged as gifts or bribes. Although women in the Han Dynasty were largely dependent on men for their survival, certain aspects of matriarchal influence can still be seen. For example, the son of Emperor Jing of Han and consortly was made the crown prince, and he was referred to as princely. Princess Guantao followed her mother's surname and was called Do Taizhu. The eldest son of Emperor Wu of Han, Lu Ju, was known as Prince Wei. During the Wei, Jin, and northern and southern dynasties, society was tumultuous, with frequent wars. However, it was also a period of flourishing culture and arts, marked by a liberation and innovation of thought. Women during this period enjoyed relatively high levels of freedom and rights. They could choose their partners according to their own wishes and remarry if their husbands died or their marriages were unhappy, which was a common phenomenon in society at the time. In the Tang dynasty, women's status was considered the highest in the eyes of the public. However, it is important to understand that even though their marriages were relatively free, and they had the right to participate in politics, these rights were still dependent on men. Even the most esteemed woman of the Tang dynasty, Empress Wu Zetian, feared being deposed during her reign as empress. During later periods, women's rights became more restricted, and punishments reflected the characteristics of the times. In the southern Song dynasty, the development of Confucianism reached its peak. Confucianism advocated for men to work outside and women to stay inside, placing deep restrictions on women. Additionally, the concept of chastity became more widespread, culminating during the reign of Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang. Zhu Yuanzhang was one of the strongest advocates for women maintaining their chastity, as can be seen from his posthumous demand that concubines be buried with him. As a result, in ancient times, women accused of unchastity faced severe punishments. The government had specific regulations regarding female criminal punishments, known as women's crimes. These punishments were not only brutal but were intended to humiliate and destroy a woman's dignity and self-esteem. The methods of punishment were numerous, but the most appalling ones involved women being stripped of their clothing during the execution to break their will. Furthermore, there was another important reason for this. In ancient times, the legal system was imperfect, and justice was not always fair. Some criminals' families would try to bribe prison guards or find substitutes for execution. This was particularly common with women of high status, whose families or confidants would go to great lengths to save them. Ancient dramas often depicted situations where someone from a poor family, resembling the criminal, would be given jewels and silver to take their place. Art reflects life, and this was indeed a real situation in ancient times. To prevent such substitutions, the authorities mandated that before the execution, the prisoner must remove their upper clothing, allowing the executioner and the official overseeing the execution to carefully inspect the body for distinguishing marks such as moles, scars, or tattoos, to confirm their identity and ensure no substitution occurred. While this practice had some reasoning behind it, it also had many drawbacks. Some historians have commented that the reason female prisoners had to strip before execution was partly for humiliation, but more importantly, to verify their identity and prevent substitution. The laws of the time dictated that women sentenced to death had to remove their upper clothing and be exposed before the public. This practice reflected the backwardness of the legal system in ancient society and a disregard for human dignity, revealing the male-dominated thinking of the time. Women often faced unfair and disrespectful treatment in society, especially those convicted of capital crimes. This was not only physical torture but also a grave insult to their character and dignity. Fortunately, with the progress of society, such inhumane practices have been abolished. Today, women's status and rights have been significantly improved. This is the History and Culture channel. Liking and subscribing are the greatest help and support to us. Thank you everyone and see you in the next time.